I knew something was wrong the moment my 3D printer jammed on data log 376 of the project audit. It wasn't just the jam itself. That thing malfunctioned more often than my old clunker's engine. But it happened right where the trail of inflated software licenses ended. Someone had tried to wipe the digital footprint clean, but my eyes were sharper than a laser beam on a circuit board. I carefully peeled the freshly printed final page from the tray, like a card player revealing their last hand, my face pale, breath shallow, but hands steady. This audit had taken 29 sleepless nights, 11 energy bars, 4 cups of strong black coffee, and 1 complete emotional breakdown in the company parking garage to finish. Now it was complete, bound like a technical manual, with tabs in a rainbow of colors. Green for system health, red for data breaches, yellow for someone's going to jail. I stared at it for a moment, not with pride, but with a kind of fearful reverence. This wasn't just documentation. This was a loaded weapon aimed at someone on the executive team, and I was about to fire it. I wasn't some corporate renegade or glass-ceiling crusader. I liked order, loved it even. It kept things structured, predictable, secure. After a childhood filled with turbulent arguments and overdue bills, digital compliance gave me peace. Algorithms didn't lie. Data logs didn't cheat, unlike people. That's why my hands trembled slightly when I sent the meeting request to Dylan, with the subject line, "Critical audit findings, immediate review required." I even included one of those yellow caution emojis. Maybe it was passive-aggressive, but subtlety was lost on him. Dylan was my manager, technically. In reality, he was a perpetually smirking void in an expensive suit who thought compliance was a type of a complex algorithm. He was the kind of guy who'd say, "Let's circle back," when he really meant, "I'm going to ignore this until it becomes someone else's problem." I knew he wouldn't like what was in the report, but I also knew, deep down, he had no choice but to act. This wasn't some minor discrepancy or a forgotten permission setting. This was deep, systemic manipulation, phantom user accounts, payments rerouted through offshore shell corporations, digital trickery so slick it practically hummed with artificial intelligence. Worst of all, it had been happening for years, hidden under just enough legitimate activity to evade casual inspections. I reread the report for the 10th time. There was no ambiguity. I had laid it all out. Names, dates, license keys, chat logs. I even cross-referenced flagged transactions with company travel records to prove 2 execs were on a beach in Hawaii when a client meeting in Chicago was billed at $200. As I walked to the meeting room, the report clutched to my chest like a sacred scroll. I wasn't nervous. I was energized. Vindication buzzed in my fingertips. I imagined Dylan reading it, his jaw tightening, a flicker of respect behind his smug facade. Maybe he'd even thank me. I was wrong, but that's a story for later. For now, I stepped into the glass-walled conference room, placed the report neatly in front of the empty chair across from mine, and smoothed down my blouse. My reflection in the window stared back. Tired, yes, but strong. I'd done the right thing. All that was left was to watch the truth do what it always eventually does. Burn. I had imagined a lot of scenarios, but not this. Not Dylan tapping away on his phone while I meticulously laid out a digital crime scene with the precision of a cybersecurity analyst. Not the bored expression, like I was reading him the terms and conditions of his own moral bankruptcy. Not the sigh. Oh, that sigh. Long, nasal, and dripping with performative exhaustion. Like I'd interrupted him mid-vacation instead of sounding the alarm on a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. "I'm going to stop you right there," he said, not looking up, his thumbs still swiping. "Is this going anywhere productive, Kayla?" I blinked. My voice, once clear and clipped, caught for the first time. "Dylan, it is productive. This is an internal risk exposure. If this goes external, we're not talking about fines. We're talking criminal liability. He leaned back in his chair, finally putting the phone down. His eyes found mine and narrowed, like I'd committed a social faux pas. Kayla, you're catastrophizing again. It's your thing. We all have a thing. You code, you analyze, you spiral. My jaw locked. I had, in fact, just taken up coding in a new language to cope with insomnia, but that was beside the point. I flipped open the report to the first red tab, pages rustling like a warning. Please just look at this page. 3 software vendors all registered within the same 30-day window, all with the same routing number, and we paid them over $400,000 this quarter. He didn't look. He just rubbed the bridge of his nose like I was the migraine. Let me make this simple. We're in a growth cycle. Do you know what that means? It means creative accounting. It means hustle. It means not panicking every time a decimal looks funny. My hands tightened on the edge of the table. It's not a decimal. It's fraud, deliberate, sustained. These accounts don't even have legitimate physical addresses. Look here. I turned the report again, jabbing my finger against the evidence like a prosecutor cross-examining a ghost. He stared, not at the data, but at me. That's when I saw it, that flicker, not of confusion or concern, but of calculation. Something passed behind his eyes. A silent shift that wasn't disinterest. That was self-preservation. Suddenly, I felt it in my gut. Dylan knew. He already knew. Kayla, he said slowly, smoothing his tie. I think you need to take a step back. This level of obsession isn't healthy. It's clouding your judgment. I'm not obsessed, I snapped. I'm doing my job. No, he said, standing abruptly. You're overreaching. You're assigning malice where there's probably just error. You're making waves, and that's not what we need right now. I stood too, unable to stay seated under the weight of his dismissal. So, what do we need? Silence? Compliance without integrity? Careful, he warned, his eyes now cold steel. You're starting to sound like a liability. It hit like a slap, a word I'd used to describe broken systems, corrupted files, now being pinned on me like a scarlet letter embroidered in corporate jargon. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't get twisted. My brain screamed to run, to email someone else, to escalate, to do something, but my body just stood there, cheeks flushed, hands useless. Dylan looked down at the thick report like it was a dead animal someone left on his desk. Then he sighed again, picked up his phone, and walked out. No acknowledgement, no thanks, no questions. Just the soft click of the door closing behind him and me standing there, surrounded by proof no one wanted to touch. The ambush came less than 2 hours later. I was at my desk, half-heartedly writing a follow-up email, subject line, circling back on vendor anomalies, when my Outlook pinged with a calendar invite marked urgent. The sender was Dylan, attendees, me, Mark from finance, and Sarah from legal. No context, just a room number and a start time that was 5 minutes away. My stomach dropped so fast I forgot to breathe. I didn't even get a chance to grab my notes. I walked down the hall on autopilot, that familiar sterile carpeting under my feet suddenly feeling like a conveyor belt toward execution. When I stepped into the glass conference room, Dylan was already there, lounging like a man holding a royal flush. Mark sat across from him, scrolling through his phone with an expression that could only be described as corporate constipation. Sarah had a legal pad open and a pen poised like she was about to transcribe someone's last words. I stood behind the chair, my pulse hammering. What's going on? Dylan smiled, not warmly, not kindly, but the kind of smile you see on a wolf just before it snaps. We wanted to talk about your project. He gestured to the bound audit report, now sitting like a wounded animal in the center of the table. My spine straightened. You mean the fraud analysis? Mark let out a little snort, then cleared his throat. Kayla, come on. No, let's give her credit, Dylan said, his voice syrupy and loud, clearly performing for the room. She put in a lot of work. Spreadsheets, charts, color-coded tabs. It's practically a scrapbook of suspicion. I felt heat rising in my face. This isn't a joke. Neither is accusing your colleagues of felonies, Sarah said calmly, still not making eye contact. I didn't accuse anyone, I said, my hands trembling now. I reported discrepancies, documented ones. It's literally my job. Your job, Dylan snapped, is to support your team, not act like some internal spy. You created a hostile narrative. You didn't bring concerns. You brought indictments. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I felt suddenly small, like a substitute teacher in a room full of jeering students. I looked to Mark. Blank. Sarah. Stone. My voice returned, shaky, but still mine. So what? I'm being punished for doing the right thing? Dylan stood slowly, like a game show host dragging out the final reveal. You're being let go, he said, effective immediately. The words didn't compute. They hung in the air like a glitch in the Matrix. For what? I croaked. Fostering a negative and untrusting work environment, Sarah answered, her tone robotic. Violation of internal cohesion protocols. Are you serious? I laughed. It came out high and brittle. This is insane. Dylan picked up the report like it was radioactive waste. He held it out at arm's length, and with theatrical disdain, dropped it into the metal trash can beside the whiteboard. Thunk. That was the sound my month of labor made. My loyalty, my integrity, my belief that someone, anyone, would care. It landed like a body. I stood frozen as the room emptied around me. Security arrived silently, like crows to a battlefield. One of them, a guy named Mike I used to say hi to in the lobby, looked vaguely embarrassed as he handed me a cardboard box. Just your personal stuff, he mumbled. You can get the rest later. I didn't cry. Not then. I just walked past my desk, past my stunned coworkers, pretending not to stare, past the company mural that said, Integrity, Innovation, Impact, in bold, cheerful Helvetica. I walked through the automatic doors with my box held tight to my chest. A coffee mug, a photo of my cat, 2 stress balls, 3 pens, the last fragments of a world that had chewed me up and spit me out in a single meeting. The sun was shining, but it felt cold. My heels clicked against the concrete like a metronome of shame. My mind was blank except for one quiet, vengeful truth. They didn't just fire me, they declared war. The first hour back home felt like I was floating underwater. Everything was muffled. My cat's meow, the hum of the fridge, the distant sound of traffic outside my 3rd-story apartment window. I set the cardboard box on my kitchen counter and just stared at it like it might detonate. A mug, a framed photo of me and my sister at Lake Tahoe, a half-dead succulent plant, souvenirs from a life that didn't exist anymore. I sat down on the edge of the couch, knees pressed together, fingers interlaced so tightly my knuckles went white. For a long time, I just stared at the floor. It wasn't until the streetlights flicked on outside that the tears finally came. Hot, humiliating, furious tears that carved salty trails down my cheeks. Crying didn't bring closure. It brought static. By 9:00 p.m., the rage started to surface. At first, it was quiet, a muttered, "Team player my ass," as I opened a bottle of drugstore rosé. By 9:15, I was pacing in mismatched socks, ranting to no one, waving a wine glass like a gavel. "Oh, sure, Dylan," I snarled at the lamp. "Let's synergize some felony fraud." Maybe next quarter we can do a little embezzlement karaoke at the retreat. Wouldn't that be fun? I slammed the wine glass down on a coaster with enough force to rattle the cat off the armrest. The humiliation, the betrayal, the absolute injustice of it all twisted inside me like barbed wire. I had given them everything. Late nights, canceled weekends, a social life that had withered to nothing but polite texts and excuses, all because I believed in doing things the right way. And for what? A goddamn trash can? I laughed. Then, a short, bitter bark of a laugh. Then I pulled my laptop from under the coffee table and set it down in front of me. The screen lit up, my reflection staring back, mascara smudged, eyes red, but something hardening behind them. I opened my cloud drive and typed in the folder name, Q2, Anomalies Internal. The report blinked into view. There it was, the same PDF they tossed like junk mail. Only this time, it was in my hands. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. For a second, doubt crept in. Was I really going to do this? Then I remembered Dylan's voice. You're starting to sound like a liability. And Sarah's eyes not even bothering to meet mine, and the sound of the report, my report, hitting the trash can like a goddamn punchline. I opened a new tab and typed, SEC Whistleblower Submission Portal. I had never done anything like this before. I was the rule follower, the data organizer, the yes, I'll stay late again woman, but something had cracked in me tonight, deep and permanent. The site loaded, cold, governmental, plain fonts, and grave warnings. I took another sip of wine. My hand still trembled as I clicked Begin Submission. The form asked for details, so I gave them names, dates, descriptions of the fraud, the culture of silence, the retaliation. Then came the upload section. I dragged the report file in like I was placing a final chess piece. Before hitting Submit, I hesitated. My finger hovered over the trackpad. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. Then I whispered, Foster this, Dylan, and hit Submit. A progress bar spun, then a confirmation screen, then silence. I closed the laptop. I had just lit a match and tossed it into a powder keg. I didn't know if it would blow up tomorrow, next week, or never. But for the first time all day, I felt something close to peace. Not safety, not hope, but power. Raw, dangerous, and it tasted better than wine. I barely slept. My body lay horizontal, but my brain was trapped in an endless loop of courtroom fantasies, HR horror stories, worst-case headlines I could practically see printed in Times New Roman. Disgruntled former employee facing defamation charges after SEC hoax. I pictured Dylan laughing on a yacht somewhere, drinking champagne while I sold my car to afford a lawyer. By sunrise, my pillow was on the floor, my wine glass still half full on the coffee table, and my laptop, closed but glowing faintly, sat like a silent accomplice. I got up around 6:00, not because I was rested, but because my mind refused to let me lie down one more minute. The city outside hadn't changed. Same garbage trucks, same pigeons fighting over a discarded bagel. But I had. I felt like a wire pulled too tight, humming with potential energy, ready to snap. I made coffee, strong, burnt, perfect. Then I sat back down at my laptop and reopened the submission confirmation page, just to prove to myself it hadn't been a dream. It was a long string of letters and numbers, a tracking ID, a virtual fingerprint marking the moment I'd kicked the beehive. I opened the email receipt from the SEC. Plain, clinical. Thank you for your submission. No follow-up, no timeline, no assurance, just cold government silence. The adrenaline had tricked me into believing that hitting submit was the end of something. It wasn't. It was the beginning of a waiting game, with no rules and no guarantees. Whistleblower laws said I could stay anonymous, but the law hadn't exactly protected me when I got thrown out like old printer paper. I stared at my inbox like it might suddenly cough up an answer. Instead, I got a promotional email from a pet supply store. I closed it. Then, I pulled up my resume, and that's when it hit me harder than anything had the day before. I wasn't just unemployed. I was radioactive. Fired compliance officer with a reputation for fostering negativity. I imagined the next interview. So, Kayla, what would you say are your strengths? Well, I once uncovered a 7-figure fraud scheme and got canned for it. So, attention to detail? I barked out a laugh that ended in a choked sob. The terror crept in like mold. What if no one believed me? What if the SEC sat on the report? What if Dylan got wind of it and spun it like I was the saboteur? What if I had just thrown my entire future into the void? I opened the report again, not to edit it, just to remind myself that it was real, that I was right. Page after page of damning facts, irrefutable math, emails I'd screen capped just in time. He deserved this. That thought became a chant, a mental shield against the doubt. He deserved this. He deserved this. He deserved this. And yet, beneath it all was that gnawing feeling, one no wine could drown, and no righteous rage could smother. I'd poked the bear. I lit the fuse, but now I had to sit in the dark and wait for the explosion, and pray it didn't blow up in my face. The next morning didn't feel like victory. It felt like cement in my bones. I sat at the kitchen table in a robe that smelled faintly of lavender and despair, nursing coffee gone cold, staring at a blinking cursor in the search jobs bar like it had insulted me personally. The cat weaved around my legs, meowing for food. I fed it out of reflex, then returned to the void. LinkedIn, Indeed, Glassdoor, every site blurring into a carousel of chirpy job descriptions and silently hostile gaps between the lines. Dynamic team player wanted, fast-paced environment, must be able to thrive under pressure. I scoffed aloud. So basically, a lobotomized doormat with a Fitbit. I filtered for compliance manager and clicked through the first 10 listings like I was flipping through obituaries. All the postings wanted experience, but not my kind of experience. They wanted people who contribute to a positive culture, not someone known for triggering internal witch hunts. And that's what I was now, wasn't it? Not a protector of standards, not a champion of ethics. I was a cautionary tale. I refreshed the page. Nothing new. I clicked over to my email, also dead. No messages from the SEC. No messages from anyone, really, except a spam offer for discount oil changes and a group chat from my sister titled Mom's Birthday Plans that I couldn't bring myself to read. I looked at my phone. Still no texts. The silence was thick, suffocating. My world, once crammed with meetings and task reminders and digital pings of importance, now echoed with emptiness. I had gone from indispensable to invisible in under 24 hours. The longer I sat there, the more the victory warped in my memory. The whistleblower report no longer felt like a righteous act. It felt like a flare gun fired into a hurricane. What if they traced it back to me? What if Dylan hired someone to dig into my IP address or subpoenaed my email records? He had money. He had connections. Hell, he probably had dinner last week with someone on the board of ethics, and I wouldn't put it past him to toast over a story about Kayla, the compliance harpy. My mind spiraled. What if he sues me? What if they smear me? What if I never work again? I tried to calm myself. Whistleblower protections exist for a reason. And my own voice argued back. And how many of those protections are worth anything when you're up against a man with a yacht and a lawyer who plays golf with the judge? I stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. The cat fled under the couch. God, I hate this, I whispered. The paranoia crackled like static. Every car outside felt suspicious. Every silence from my inbox a confirmation of doom. My apartment, usually my sanctuary, felt like a pressure cooker without a vent. I opened the fridge, grabbed the half bottle of rosé from the night before, and took a long pull straight from the bottle. I didn't even flinch at the taste. I walked back to the window and stared out over the city. I used to love this view. Now it looked like a horizon made of broken promises. I thought back to the moment I hit submit. That high. That flash of control. Where was it now? Replaced by this. An airless waiting room between justice and collapse. No confirmation, no news, no revenge montage. Just a woman in a robe with shaking hands, whispering worst-case scenarios to a living room that wouldn't talk back. And for the first time since the meeting with Dylan, I felt it. Not rage, not defiance, just fear. Heavy, real, and very much mine. It was just supposed to be a drive. That's what I told myself when I put on jeans for the first time in 3 days and grabbed my keys from the chipped bowl by the door. I didn't pack a lunch, didn't even brush my hair, just filled a travel mug with burnt coffee and drove. The car practically knew the way on its own, muscle memory carved from years of routine. Past the same strip malls, the same coffee shops, the same billboard for a tax attorney with a face like melted wax. The closer I got to the tech district, the more my palms started to sweat against the steering wheel. It had only been a few days, and yet it felt like I'd aged a decade. I parked across the street from the building, their building, and turned off the engine. The structure loomed like a smug fortress of brushed steel and tinted glass. I'd once thought it looked impressive. Now it looked predatory. I didn't get out of the car. I just sat there, gripping my coffee like it was the only thing tethering me to the present moment. The heat had long since bled out of it, much like my sense of justice. The lobby looked normal, businesslike. People moved in and out, suits and keycards and shoulder bags. I tried to picture myself in that stream again, badge clipped, head down, report in hand, but it didn't fit anymore, like trying to force yourself into a jacket 2 sizes too small. I took a long sip and flinched at the bitterness. God, this tastes like guilt and printer ink, I muttered. Then my phone buzzed, a number I recognized instantly. Emily Chen, the junior data analyst I had mentored for the past year. Smart girl, nervous, always brought her own calculator, even when Excel could do the job. I had spent hours walking her through audit trails and report structures. I remembered writing, "You got this," on a Post-it before Emily's first presentation. I hadn't expected to ever hear from her again. The message was short, frantic, typed in a rush. "OMG, Kayla, don't say anything, but you need to see this. Something is happening." I stared at the screen, my heart thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reread the message 3 times. Something is happening. I looked up, my eyes scanning the front of the building. At first, everything looked the same. Then I saw it. A black sedan pulling up, sleek and government issue. Then another. Doors opened in near synchronized choreography. Men and women in dark suits stepped out, badges already visible on their hips. They moved with purpose. No hesitation. No wrong turns. My coffee sloshed in my lap. I froze. Hand halfway to my phone. Pulse climbing like a fire alarm in my chest. The SEC. It had to be. It had to be. Glass front doors opened for them automatically, like the building was welcoming its own reckoning. My breath fogged the window. I didn't blink. Couldn't. It felt like watching a play where the curtain had finally dropped on the first act, and I somehow had written the script. I didn't dare reply to Emily's message. Not yet. My hands trembled, and not from caffeine. The building that once made me feel so small now looked vulnerable, not invincible, not untouchable. just a box full of people, paper trails, and lies, and someone had finally opened it. I leaned forward, my forehead against the steering wheel, a strange, guttural laugh bubbling out of my chest. It wasn't joy. It wasn't relief. It was disbelief. I had come here for closure, or maybe just to poke at the bruise. What I got instead was the opening note of something I didn't even dare hope for anymore. Consequences. I stared through the windshield, breath held, as the first suited agent stepped through the glass doors like a wrecking ball wrapped in a tailored blazer. No logos, no fanfare, just the slow, steady march of federal inevitability. One agent flashed a badge at the front desk. The receptionist, a kid barely old enough to rent a car, visibly blanched and started typing so fast his fingers blurred. Another agent pulled a leather folder from under her arm, the kind that held subpoenas, court orders, warrants with names on them in bold, unflinching ink. My heart didn't race. It slowed, every beat heavy, measured, as if my body knew something my brain was just starting to grasp. It's happening. I watched the glass elevators ascend with eerie calm. Inside the mirrored surfaces, I caught glimpses of my former coworkers, blurred faces turning to look. Confusion first, then recognition, then dread. A uniquely corporate progression, where a surprise visit becomes a threat in under 3 seconds. The agents didn't wait. They moved, targeted, coordinated, like a SWAT team for spreadsheets. I saw Mark from finance first, his expression frozen mid-laugh as he passed the reception desk and caught sight of the suits. He stopped in his tracks, his smile collapsing, coffee splashing down his tie. Then came Sarah. She was in the lobby, holding her phone, clearly mid-conversation. An agent approached. Sarah's eyes locked onto the badge, and her spine straightened like someone had yanked it from the heavens. Her lips stopped moving, her mouth hung open. She didn't blink. And then Dylan, 4th floor, right side window, standing like a statue behind the tinted glass, barely visible, but unmistakable in that $2,000 charcoal suit he probably bought just to feel expensive while lying through his teeth. His hand was raised to the phone. He didn't put it down, just stared. I watched his face, watched it go from bored arrogance to blank confusion to the slow, creeping terror of a man who's just realized he's no longer at the top of the food chain. My fingers tightened around the coffee cup, long gone cold. No one was laughing now. All the boardroom theater, the smug dismissal, the performative trashing of my report, all of it was unraveling in real time. Not behind closed doors, not in some sanitized HR room, but here, under fluorescent lights and federal scrutiny. I imagined the sound of hard drives being cloned, filing cabinets popping open, nervous glances in glass reflections, someone in IT being dragged away from his desk. The beginning of a panic that would ripple through every hallway I once walked. And I was no longer part of it. I wasn't trapped in that building anymore. I wasn't sitting across from Dylan, begging him to see the truth. I was outside, untouchable, watching the tower fall from a front row seat. Windows rolled up, the perfect ghost in the machine. A sharp exhale escaped my lips. It wasn't laughter. It was cleaner, sharper. The breath of a woman no longer wondering if she'd done the right thing. There was no question anymore. I hadn't just pulled the trigger. I was the bullet. And now they were bleeding truth. My phone buzzed again, sharp, sudden, like a firecracker in the silence of my car. My hands didn't tremble this time when I picked it up. I already knew. My body knew. The world had finally tilted back into balance, and all that remained was confirmation. It was Emily. "They're walking everyone out. It's the SEC. Kayla, they have a report. It looks exactly like yours. The one he threw out, and they have a court order with Dylan's name on it. He looked like he was going to be sick. I stared at the screen. The words blurred for a second, not from tears, but from the weight of them. The way truth sometimes arrives like a scalpel, clean, cold, and final. I lowered the phone slowly, let it rest in my lap. Then finally, it came. Not joy, not even pride, just a slow, grim smile. The kind forged in the ruins of humiliation and scorched patience. The kind that doesn't celebrate, but marks the end. I started the car. The engine hummed to life, low and steady. I didn't look back at the building, not once. Let them scramble. Let them whisper and spin and plead. Let Dylan feel the floor go out from under him the same way he had done to me. Let him watch his empire get dissected cell by cell by people who don't take team player as a legal defense. I pulled out into traffic, smooth as water over a blade. The city bustled around me, oblivious to what I'd set in motion. Just another day in the world, but not for me. Behind me, the past burned quietly, completely. I didn't need to see it to know the bridge was gone, charred to ash and floating in the rear view. That job, that title, that office, with its empty promises and plastic plants, it had died the moment he tossed my truth in the trash. All I had done was resurrect it. Now they would live with it, the report, the subpoenas, the consequences. I didn't need revenge that screamed. I got one that stuck, and as the skyline faded behind me, the only thing louder than the quiet in my chest was the beautiful, irreversible fact that Dylan's world had finally been introduced to reality by the one woman he tried to erase. This story teaches us that integrity and perseverance are powerful, even in the face of injustice. Kayla faced betrayal and humiliation for doing the right thing, but she chose to stand firm and seek justice through the proper channels. It reminds us that while the path to truth and fairness can be long and difficult, and you might feel isolated or fearful, your actions can indeed make a significant impact. Even when your efforts seem to be discarded or ignored, remember that truth has a way of surfacing, and holding on to your values will ultimately lead to a more just outcome. Do not let fear silence your conscience. Sometimes, being the liability to corruption means you are the hero of truth. Keep striving for what is right, and trust that justice, eventually, will prevail.